beware of the moon, stick to the roads, stay off the moors. They failed to do that, and look what happened. Let's get into my review of An American Werewolf in London. Let's do it. Hey, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about one of the best werewolf movies of all time for a lot of people, including me. So I'm playing my hand up front. I really love this film, and we're going to talk about it right now. An American Werewolf in London was released August 21st in 1981. It was rated R, had a budget of $10 million, and upon release that year, it made $30 million in the U.S. and $62 worldwide. Now, this film, John Landis actually wrote the script for this film in 1969 when he was working as, well, he calls it a schlepper on Kelly's Heroes in Yugoslavia. He did all kinds of stuff, stunt work, he'd run and get coffee for the guys. So yes, he wrote this while he was in Yugoslavia in 1969. Now, him and Rick Baker, he met Rick Baker when he made Schlock. Rick Baker made that suit for that film. They talked about American Werewolf in London since when they filmed that, and Rick Baker tried to figure out in the 70s how to pull off the effects, because John Landis's whole idea was the transformation scene was going to be filmed in one take under bright, harsh light. That was always the plan from the beginning of conception of this film. Didn't know how he was going to pull it off, but he gave it to Rick Baker to figure it out. Well, John Landis, it took 8 years to get the money for this. And in that time, Rick Baker got sick of waiting, so he went off to do a little film called The Howling, which is another excellent werewolf film. And John Landis, coming off the success of Animal House and Blues Brothers, finally got the money to make this film. He wrote, the problem with the script was, everybody loved the script, but they said it was too funny to be a straight horror film, and it was too scary to be a comedy. And back then, horror comedies weren't a thing, really, that studios really understood or knew how to sell. So he had a hard time getting it. Now, after the success of those two films, somebody gave him the money. Paulie Graham gave him the money. He called Rick Baker up, and if you see the interviews with Landis, he tells this story every time. And there's a lot of interviews out there on YouTube. Just look for John Landis about American Werewolf in London. He talks about this film a lot, or any interviews this comes up. This movie obviously comes up because it's one of the best of all time. He called Rick Baker up and said, I got the money, let's go. And Rick Baker was like, I'm already working on a werewolf film called The Howling. And Landis flipped out on the phone with him and said, do you show him the exchange-o heads, this process he came up with to do the transformation? And Rick's like, yeah. And Landis lost his shit on him. But Rick Baker went to the Joe Dante and the makers of The Howling and said that he was going to leave the project, but he was going to leave his protege to do the effects, which that protege is the great Rob Bottin, who went on to do The Thing. And then he went with Landis over to England and shot American Werewolf in London. That's the story behind that, which is cool because Rob Bottin got to show his skills on The Howling. He got to finish that show and show what he could do, and he worked with Carpenter on The Fog, and then he went to do The Thing, which is his that was what blew him up, and he went on to do other films after that. And Rick Baker's a master at this, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Now, for this film, he brought in David Naughton to play David, our main character. His best friend Jack, played by Griffin Dunn, and they were two best friends that are backpacking through England at the time, and are planning on eventually going on to other countries to meet other friends. And Jenny Otter's in this film, and she plays Nurse Alex. And when I was young, I had a major crush on her, because she's a very beautiful woman. And we meet them, and they get dropped off at this intersection on these dirt roads out in the country in England in a truck full of sheep. And as John Landis says, this movie's not very subtle. You know these guys aren't going anywhere good if they're with a bunch of sheep. So they get off and they start walking down this road, and they get to the slaughtered lamb, and they go in, and people stop what they're doing. It's a very lively bunch, this small little village in the middle of nowhere, and everybody stops as these two Americans come in and sit down, and then people start getting lively again. And Jack notices the pentagram that's scribbled or painted on the wall, and in the middle, after this guy tells this joke, he asks what it's about, and they tell them they should leave. And that's when they say, stay on the roads, stay off the moors, beware of the moon, or proximity to that. And they leave. And the one woman's totally against it. You can't let them leave, because they know, the townsfolk know what the problem is. But nobody wants to tell these Americans because they think they're going to think they're batshit crazy, which, of course, you would think they're batshit crazy. So our two Americans leave and start going back down this dirt road, this country road at night, with just the moon and the fog and the moors, and that's it. And all of a sudden we start hearing this howling out in the distance. And this is definitely one of the scariest scenes of the whole film. Now they're joking, but they start hearing this and they start getting freaked out. And they turn around and they realize as they're talking, they walked off the road and into the moors and are lost. They can't find a road. It's pitch black out, only moonlight. And the howling's getting closer and the growling. And they're getting freaked out. And they're trying to get back to the slaughtered lamb. And David falls down, slips, and he asks Jack to help him up. And just as Jack goes to help him up, the werewolf comes and pushes Jack over, and we cut to Jack being ripped apart. And all we see is the werewolf's head, and Jack screaming out for help. Jesus Christ, help me, help me. And by the time David goes back, Jack's all tore up. It's a very frightening scene, very gory. They don't hold back on the blood here. And then David gets attacked, and the townsfolk show up, shoot the werewolf. David looks over and he sees this guy, this naked gentleman, and he passes out and he wakes up in the hospital in London. This is where we meet Alex, the nurse, who's taking care of David. And they're smitten right away. She's smitten with him and he likes her, and she's a very attractive woman. And he starts having nightmares, very vivid nightmares. And then Jack shows up one morning, all tore up, and he tells David, he's very friendly, and I like that aspect of it, where his personality hasn't changed. He's still David's friend, but he's warning him of things to come, that he's going to turn into a werewolf and he's going to hurt a lot of people, and he has to take his own life, which is not an easy thing to tell somebody, obviously. And David thinks it's just a dream. And when he finally gets to start discharged from the hospital, Alex lets him come back to her apartment, and this is where their love affair starts. And that night, after they have sex, Jack shows up to David in the middle of the night, and they have a conversation in the living room, and Jack reiterates that he has to take his own life or he's going to hurt people. Well, the next day, Alex goes to work, David's by himself, and this is when we get the epic transformation scene, which is fantastic. A matter of fact, this film, that was the first year the Academy Awards gave out an Academy Award for Best Makeup Effects, and this film won it. Rick Baker won it for the effect, rightfully so, for the transformation effects in this film. We see the transformation effects, and then we see the werewolf going from place to place, killing people. David wakes up the next morning naked in a zoo. He gets back to the apartment. Alex agrees with the doctor to bring him back to the hospital. And from a cabbie, they learn what's been going on. And David flees the cab, tells Alex that he has to get away from her. He's in love with her, but he's afraid he did some horrible things. And he takes off. And he ends up in this porno theater. Jack shows up with all the other people he killed, and they're telling him he has to kill himself or he's going to hurt more people. And that's when we get our final sequences, our climax of this film. David turns into a werewolf in this porno theater, kills some patrons, the cops show up, the werewolf breaks out, we see it running in the streets, rips the head off of the police chief, goes into this alley. Alex comes with the doctor, the third version of the SWAT team shows up, and she tries to talk to the werewolf. The werewolf goes to bite her. The cops shoot him, and David tragically dies. And Alex, our final shot is Alex standing there crying, and that's the end of American Werewolf in London. I've always loved this film. It's definitely a classic. A lot of people love this film, rightfully so. It's well constructed. Yes, there are some comedic parts. I agree with John Landis, though. And Landis has said this many times. It's a horror film with comedy in it. And I agree. Yes, there are some funny moments. It's not subtle. Like I said in the beginning, they get out of a truck with a bunch of sheep in the beginning of the film. That's how we're introduced to these two characters that are leads through the film. It's not subtle. You know these guys are going to die. They're there. They're lambs for the slaughter right from the beginning. And it's a tragedy. Obviously, the Wolfman always was a tragic figure. And David's a tragic figure. He finds love, and he's cursed with this awful thing, and he does some awful things, and when the realization, and at the end he ends up getting killed for it. But there are some funny bits throughout the whole film. There definitely is. There's some definitely laughing moments throughout the film. Landis directs the shit out of this film. It's well directed. Obviously the makeup effects are stuff of legend at this point. Rick Baker is one of the best makeup effects artists of all time. And the man's retired now, but he's done some of the greatest effects of all time over the years. He's up to Rob Bottin, Dick Smith, the K&B guys, other guys, that have, toiled on makeup effects over the years. So yes, this is an excellent werewolf film, and it was actually made around the same time as The Howling. They were kind of competing films that came out around the same time. I love both films. Both films are definitely different, for sure. And yeah, it's just a great werewolf film. There's some scary moments, there's some funny moments, although now as an adult, I don't find it as creepy. Definitely the opening scene, the opening attack sequence on the boys is freaky. The attack in the subway is well shot and well constructed and a little scary. Not now, but when I was a kid, it was. But yeah, there's definitely some shocking moments. There's a lot of blood. The werewolf looks excellent, although you only ever see the head of it mostly and a little bit of the body. You never see the whole thing, and it's obviously because they couldn't build the whole werewolf and make it look right. But for what's there, it looks excellent. It's well done. Now, a little bit of trivia. I know I already went over, it took 8 years to get made, and about Landis and Rick Baker went off to make The Howling when Landis called him when he finally got the money. The only other thing I really have is that the porno in the theater was actually a fake porno shot by the production. Landis and his production shot that. It was not a real porno. It was shot by the production specifically for the film. And so, yeah, it wasn't a real porno. But so that's about it for trivia. I would give American Werewolf in London a 9.75 out of 10. I think this movie is damn near perfect. I love this film. I watch it every October. And it's just a great film. If you've never seen it, I highly recommend it. I just gave it a 9.75 out of 10. What are your thoughts on An American Werewolf in London? Leave a comment down below. Let me know. Hit the thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button. Share this video. I'd greatly appreciate it. I will be back over the weekend. I think I'm going to do a video of my Halloween decorations. But other than that, I'll be back next week with some more reviews. I hope you all have a kick-ass weekend. I'll see you soon.